Hello, everyone, and welcome back to On the Spot, the podcast where we dive into the minds that make up the creative world. My name is Riley. I'm one of the co-founders of The Spot, and alongside me is NJ, who is also one of the co-founders of The Spot.
Hi, everybody. This is NJ.
Today, we're joined by Dan Beltran.
Hey, guys.
Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Dan Beltran, as I mentioned before. I am a campaign identity and branding logo designer based in Spokane, Washington, where I currently serve as the director of graphic design for Gonzaga Athletics. My background is primarily in sports and branding design, as I'd mentioned, and I've previously kind of worked and partnered with clients across the NBA, the NFL, MLB, MLS, and NCAA through my studio, my LLC, Design with Dan. And I kind of would say that my area of expertise lies in that logo, branding, sports graphic realm.
So, I think our next question is, how did you get into design? Like, did you always have this idea of like, yeah, I think I'm going to be a designer? What kind of like fueled you to become passionate about design?
Right. I don't think I ever really had a desire to be a graphic designer from the get-go. It was always something where I'd watch sports specifically when I was in high school and elementary school, and I always kind of appreciated the teams that had like the cool uniforms, and I always like, for instance, like the Oregon Ducks, their college football team, that was kind of always my favorite team to watch, just because every game they would have sort of a new uniform that they would display, which I really found to be inspiring, and I kind of picked up on as I was watching them throughout the years. And so I always have had that appreciation for design and creative, but it never really sparked for me until I was in college. And I actually have my degree from Gonzaga University, the place where I currently work, in public relations. And along the time where I was actually getting that degree, I jumped into design, I think my sophomore or junior year, and used basically every single waking moment that I had outside of class to teach myself. And so it wasn't really like one defining moment. It was sort of like I went in thinking that I was going to be an accounting major, right? And then that didn't end up panning out because I hate numbers. Who would have thought? And so, so I went in and refocused my energy into the creative realm. And it was something that I'd found that I had a lot of passion for that I didn't previously realize. Yeah, that's kind of like how I got my start, was just this obsessive mentality that accompanied my degree while I was getting it. And I have never looked back.
Do you already have experience in graphic design?
I literally learned it on the go. I said, this is cool. I can't say if I paid or torrented. I won't go there, but I think we all know the answer of how we started in graphic design. And so from that point, I basically just found any tutorial that I could. And I always tell people when they ask me, like, how do I learn? What steps do I take? I always say to go for the hardest, most difficult tutorial you can find, because not only will you learn whatever you're watching or whatever you're trying to figure out, you'll simultaneously pick up the little tips and tricks that people have on the way who are already professionals, right? And so that was how I took it upon myself to learn on a daily basis. I literally had a spot at my college. People knew that I would be sitting there if I wasn't in class. And it was like my corner of the university where I sat and just did tutorial after tutorial after tutorial, day in and day out. I was literally obsessed, and I still am to this day, right? Because I am lucky enough to be able to call my passion my profession. And so it was that obsessive mentality that caused me to pick up, I don't want to say pen and paper, but digital tutorial and YouTube and things of that nature. I had this creative eye that I knew I could do better than what I was seeing around me, but I just didn't have the physical capabilities, like the know-how, the technical knowledge of the programs and the software. And so the first step, I guess, was just learning the fundamentals and figuring out what color theory was, what hierarchy and tension were, how to set up projects in InDesign, type spacing and things like that. And I just kind of immersed myself into this culture of learning, and I loved every second.
Have you had any experience with online education, stuff like Skillshare, Linda?
Yeah. So when I started out, the barrier to entry for me was that you either are paying for a software or you're paying for a skill website and it's all streamlined and easy and right there in front of you, or you have to take it upon yourself to search out the tutorials, which takes time, and you have to like filter through the good ones. So for me, as a college student not having a ton of money, I took it upon myself to really search YouTube and try and find all the free things at first when I was starting out. And I think that actually got me pretty much where I needed to be. I did make as often as I could throughout my career. I try to make usage of websites like Skillshare, Lynda, School of Motion is another good one where I recently started a class. And so any instance where I can find those paid ones now that I've been fortunate enough to kind of have a little bit more of an income, I try to use. But I would say it's the same ones that everybody's heard, right? And so I try to take it upon myself to teach others now that I guess that I have that knowledge.
You've done like a little bit of, it's mainly just online education, just teaching yourself from what it sounds like. But like,
Yes.
do you have like a comparison? Like, how would you compare that to traditional education, like teaching in a classroom?
Yeah. See, it's really tricky. It's the same paradox that I mentioned earlier about paying for something versus searching it out for yourself. I think I don't want to like knock on a traditional design education because I think that there are fundamentals that I even lack to this day that I never was able to pick up just because when you are teaching yourself, you don't really know what's important, to learn. You just kind of go where your heart takes you. And so I think when you go through like a formal, if you want to speak strictly formal design education, you get a little bit more of like a streamlined course on what you need to know and what you don't versus the way that I did it, which was kind of navigating from point A to point B to point C to point F to point G kind of thing, and then back to D kind of thing. And so I couldn't tell you just because I don't have a traditional education. I don't know which one is more effective. I do know that there's no excuse for anybody in today's day and age who says that they can't learn something just because the entire world's knowledge base is available at your fingertips, right? And so I think if you've got the motivation to teach yourself and you feel like you're someone who is more of a go-getter in the realm of seeking that out, that's for you. But I feel like if you're someone who feels more comfortable in a classroom setting where you can get unique one-on-one feedback and guidance, I think that that's a route you could go as well in terms of a formal education. So I don't mean to ride a unicycle down the line of not answering this question, but I would say you have to figure out what works for you pretty quickly and kind of do that. That's my you know how you learn best, and so follow that path.
Yeah, I would say people have to weigh the pros and cons of learning on your own versus having an ecosystem around you.
Exactly. And I think that I'm blessed to have been able to get that other I have the public relations side, the marketing side of things, which I think plays into creativity. But I would say formal education, in my opinion, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty, teaches you how to learn and it teaches you how to absorb information. So from that perspective, I'm grateful that I have one in marketing. But I think from that point on, once you graduate, it's up to you to continue to learn for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So, have you always wanted to do sports design, or was that just something that you stumbled upon that you liked?
Yeah, I would say primarily I work in sports just because that's kind of how it happened. It's funny. A lot of people get into sports design because they love sports, but I actually really like sports design. And then as a result of getting into that career, I really like sports now. And so I kind of was the
Okay.
opposite. I always like appreciated sports and watched it growing up, but never really was to the point where I could hold a conversation about the game last night with it, kind of thing. Like I never was like in the know with sports, but now as a result of having gotten into sports, it's given me a new appreciation for it. And so I actually I've always I've always appreciated it, right? Like sports design. But when I was starting out, actually in my career, I worked for a sock company that
Sock
basically,
company?
yeah, SOCK,
Huh.
that basically printed skylines of different cities on their socks. And so I did a lot of
Hmm.
grunt work, so to speak. And that was like my first job ever. They're paying me like $18 an hour to like work in their like company. Like there was 4 employees kind of thing, and it was super fun. But after that, I ended up saying, okay, this is lame. I work for a sock company. Look at yourself, pull yourself together. And got a job at a real estate kind of property management firm that managed a bunch of collegiate apartment complexes across the nation. And that job, I think, really allowed me to dive into my branding, because all of these complexes, they wanted me to kind of like take control of the branding for, and there's like 25, 30 properties of like 500 beds in each property kind of thing. So it's a lot. And so for a 22, 23-year-old kid, this was like my wet dream to be able to handle all this stuff, because they gave me essentially the keys to the kingdom, right? And so I was making I still have logos that are like 20 feet by 20 feet, because they went and got them like metal worked and put onto the side of these apartment complexes across the nation. It's super cool. And so that kind of like got me into the branding side of things, or like got me like more amped up about it, I guess. And so from there, after I moved on from that role, I actually happened to see a job open up for the Seattle Sounders, which is the Major League Soccer team in the city that I was at the time of Seattle. And I said, oh my God, that seems like the perfect job, right? And so that actually was what got me into sports. I had always, as I said before, appreciated it, but that jump to the role of the Sounders, I was a junior graphic designer at the time, is kind of what propelled me into where I am today. And I still actually talk to my former boss at that role daily, almost daily. His name is Alex Preston, and he is the global brand director for New Balance right now. So you never know
Okay.
Wow.
where things are going to go. You know, like you never know who you're going to meet. So yeah, and for that, like he gave me my start in the sports industry, and so I'm forever grateful for that.
Okay. Well, how did you branch back to Gonzaga then?
So I worked for the Sounders for about a year and a half, and then during my time at the Sounders, I guess I'll just give you the little synopsis. We used an agency called STN Digital to work and do specialty work, because they're like a like social media marketing agency. So when we didn't have the bandwidth to do stuff, we would freelance it out to them. And so then after I left the Sounders, I freelanced for like 6 months, and then ended up applying for a role with that agency that I had mentioned at STN Digital, and worked for them for a year and a half. And one of my coworkers who was there, I was like completely happy there. Life was good. But my coworker who ended up leaving happened to just send me this role of Gonzaga on Twitter one day after he'd left. And he's like, dude, check it out. Like, your alma mater is hiring. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, it's the perfect job. My wife's mother lives up here, so we've got family in the same city. We literally live 7 minutes away from them. It's a job in my industry that would allow us to move. At the time, we were in San Diego, which is where the agency was located, and her whole family is up here in Washington State. And so it just made sense to like move and be closer to family and continue working in my role. And so at that point, I was like, all right, like let's do it, kind of thing. And so I applied, and here I am.
So, like, you've been working within the sports design industry for sounds about like how long have you been working within them?
I would
industry now?
say in sports specifically, what is it? Maybe like 4 or 5 years.
Okay. So like within like your time there, like how would you rate your experience? I mean, is it a very competitive like industry to be within, or like
It
is it
is.
just kind of chill? And
I
see your
think it's
thoughts on that.
simultaneously competitive and chill, because the barrier to entry these days is so low. Like all you basically have to make it in the sports industry is a passion for sports and a knowledge of Photoshop, right? And so I think from that perspective, it's really easy to get into. The community of social media sports is super welcoming and super accepting. Simultaneously, it's very competitive, so there's a lot of egos, which is unfortunate. You run into a lot of people who think that they're a little bit more important than they actually are. And so I would say for the most part, it's a fun, engaging, constantly evolving, constantly we're all challenging each other to be better industry to be in. But it's not something where you can kind of like lackadaisically just hop in and be cool with, because it takes a lot of work, and that goes for any industry you'll ever be in. You can't really just immediately hop to the top, right? And so I still feel like in my career I've got a long way to go. I've got a lot of learning to do. In the grand scheme of things basically just starting out, right? Because I've only been here for like 4 or 5 years, like I said. And so I want to see a 20, 30, 40-year career, come as a result of this. And I think that the barrier to entry makes it a little difficult to stand out, just because there's a lot of noise and a lot of like, it's kind of, it turns into somewhat of a echo chamber, because you see people who are constantly doing the same thing, and then this trend catches on, and then that trend catches on. And so to me, I think it's really important to like spend time and spend thoughtful time in the industry, but also make sure that you are getting outside experience as well, which is why I think my like branding and logo aspect of my career comes into play, because that is kind of an outlet for me to be able to step outside of the sports design industry, but still stay fresh.
You mentioned trends earlier. Like, how do you keep up with like the trends? Because like they're ever changing. Like, how do you keep up with those?
I hate them. I hate trends, man. They suck, because and I rebelled against them for quite a long time, and I held that mentality. And then I read a book that's name is escaping me right now, that basically said, don't fight trends, just participate in them, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time you approach the keyboard, because that puts a lot of mental strain on you to challenge yourself to literally be the best ever possibly every single time, right? So sometimes it's more beneficial to just get something done that you feel good with, that isn't necessarily record breaking, right? And so keeping up with trends, obviously there's the Spot Discord server, everybody holla, join, go jump in. But aside from that, I'm super involved in the Twitter community of sports graphic designers. We all kind of use the hashtag SM Sports to kind of identify the work that we're doing and promote different events and avenues and things like that. I run a Behance page strictly dedicated to sports design, which I find extremely helpful in filtering that type of content. I used to be a part of a Facebook community of a little bit over 20,000 designers that were not specifically sports related, but just designers from across the globe, called the Designers League, which was super fundamental in helping me grow as a creative. And then I kind of just look on the internet for different whatever. I try my best to not adhere strictly to trends, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, because you want to be relevant and you want to participate in what everybody else is enjoying, but you also want to stick out and stand out. And so it's a constant struggle.
Would you say you have to keep up with the sports trends in addition to actual design trends?
I think there's overlap. I think that there is a certain amount of overlap, but I also think that to a certain extent, the social media sports community is a little isolated from like skeuomorphism, for instance. That doesn't really come into play in what we do, or this neomorphism stuff that's happening right now. It's not really super, I guess it could be relevant in sports design, but we kind of have our own little mini trends within the trends. But yeah, I think it is important, and I just see it on a daily basis, just scrolling through Dribble, scrolling through Behance, scrolling through Google, Pinterest, whatever, where the design inspiration, all of these different avenues that I have. And so I think I try to like reflect everything together. But at the same time, like just create stuff, like don't worry so much about whether it's on trend. Just do something that makes you feel good and makes your stomach feel warm and fuzzy inside. So it's kind of my 2 cents.
Fall in love with your activity.
Absolutely.
I had a question that you mentioned a point earlier about the importance of image for sports team, that you were always attracted to sports team that had
Yes
a strong character or personality? Would you say that's important to be noticed?
I would say 1,000%. I think having I don't want to say stigma because that has a negative connotation, but having like a notoriety for placing heavy value on design or creativity or expression, I think is extremely important to stick out. I think places that emphasize that level of expression are typically, it's kind of like I judge a restaurant, right? If I go to a breakfast restaurant and I want to go see how good they make bacon and eggs, right? So I focus on how good they can do the easiest stuff because then that translates to the rest of it. So for me, when I see an organization that invests in creatives and creativity, that tells me that they're not cutting corners anywhere else, right? And so when I see a logo designed for a restaurant or when I see a well-designed brochure, that I can tell, because you can tell when something's been slapped together versus not. So when I can tell that they've invested and they've said this is important to us, that's an organization that doesn't cut corners and isn't sitting here shelving off creative as if it's, sub tier. And so I kind of have always appreciated that aspect of design. It's an indicator for me on whether or not I trust a business. I think that's generally speaking what design does, but even more so as a creative, it helps me streamline who I trust my money with, right? And so,
Yeah.
good question.
Thank you. When I think of sports team, the ones I think about most are the ones that have us maybe invested the most into their image. Yeah, we end up judging books by the cover a lot.
We do, and it's unfortunate, but it's true because sometimes you only have the time to check out the cover. You don't have time to read the entire book, and you're forced to make a snap judgment, right? And so you just got to make sure that your X's are dashed, your T's are dashed, your I's are crossed, all of that stuff is ready to go before anybody sees what you're putting out.
Yeah, which is basically what our job is. Make a visual impact
Right.
and try to be noticeable and remembered.
100%. Communicate, add value, be genuine.
This could include like the time that you've been doing like branding, or you could this could go into like just your overall time like doing design. Like, what's the coolest project?
Oh my God, that is a very difficult question to ask. Dang, I don't even know how I would begin to answer that question because I was part of the MLS. So for the Seattle Sounders, we went to the MLS Cup. I think we've gone like 3 times in the last 5 years, but I was physically there for 2 of them. And it was really cool to kind of be present for that part of it. I know that wasn't necessary. Like I was working for the second one, but I attended as a fan for the first one because I had just joined the club like 3 weeks prior. And so that was a really cool experience to be there for like the MLS Cup, which is the absolute ultimate like game to be played. Another one that comes to mind is with Team USA to develop a social media truck. I actually hated this project while I was doing it, but looking back, it was a really, really cool project that I think isn't live now because of coronavirus, but was live at the time. It was a truck that was basically advertising the Olympics in Tokyo, and I designed. It's a flatbed kind of 18-wheeler that it extends out and is split into like 6 different rooms, and each room is an experience that you can go through that relates to the Olympics and the journey through the progression of the Olympic, as if you're an athlete from when you get there to when you compete to when you win a medal. And it was kind of hell to make just because I'd never done experiential design before in my life, but it was really cool to see it all come together at the end and walk through it and be able to be present through the entire experience that I had basically developed from the ground up. So that was cool. And then my final project that I think is the coolest thing that I've ever done is I did branding for a top rank boxing fight in Vegas. And so I had all of my work across the strip in Vegas, which was pretty cool. The agency that I was at, STN Digital, they flew me out and said, hey, we want you to come appreciate your work, maybe take some pictures for portfolio kind of thing. We're going to get you ringside tickets to the boxing match, and so I was like, sick, I am there, let's go. But at the end of the boxing match, they held like a presser that was private. It was a private presser where the media could come in and ask questions. And on the presser wall was this huge, like 30-foot by 90-foot banner that I had made, and it was like the backdrop to the presser. And you can actually go see it on my Instagram at Design with Dan, or I think it's at Design with Dan. But Tyson Fury, the guy who fought in that fight, starts singing American Pie, and he gets the entire presser to join him in singing American Pie behind or in front of this big banner that I made. And it was just so cool to see that. I filmed it while it was happening, and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. That's my design. That's Tyson Fury singing American Pie. This is great. Like, I will never get higher than this. And obviously that's not true, but in my mind, I was like, this is awesome. So I think, it's tough to boil down one singular experience because there's just been so many. And I'm so grateful that I get to do this and call this my job. Like, this is just stupid. It's fun, like that this is my career.
It's really gratifying to see your work come to life, not just seeing it online.
Definitely.
Going back pretty far back, whenever you're talking about like you always like going like you watch sports, but it's like never in the know of like what's going on. But like you're from Washington, like do you have like a favorite sports team, or like what's your favorite sport? I guess to work on.
I don't think I have either of those. I don't think I have a favorite sport that I prefer to watch. I like watching all of it. NBA, NFL, NBA, MLS. I love bowling. It's fun to watch. It really is. It's electric, man. If you've seen those like final pin bowling matches that the guy just goes for 300 and it's just electric. But man, in terms of a favorite sport or sports team, I always come back to the Oregon Ducks just because they're the ones that got me into all of this, like I mentioned before. So I think that they've got a special place in my heart. But as far as like a sports team goes, it's really difficult in my industry to come out and say favorites because you kind of polarize yourself, like then, maybe the enemy team wouldn't reach out to me and offer me a position in the future. So I try to like stay out of it. But yeah, I think if there were one to go for, I'm always like a huge Nike guy too. And so I know that the Oregon Ducks have like a direct connection because the founder of Nike went there. So I guess I would have to say Oregon Ducks football.
Are you actually in contact with the sports team you work for? Like, do you get to meet players? Do you get to go to events with them?
Yeah. So they're like at Gonzaga, we do photo shoots with the athletes. We'll do interviews, one-on-ones. We'll have people talk to them, kind of thing, that we facilitate. And so I think a lot of times it's important to have that relationship with the players because you get more out of it than if it was just kind of, all right, pose this way, great, thank you, next kind of thing. And so for these photo sessions, we will like literally part of the marketing department will come in and sit there for just like 5-6 hours a day as we go through the whole team, and we're just chopping it up the whole time and talking and stuff. And so I think that's kind of like my favorite part in a way is just having the ability to remember that they're just normal people, right? Like they get obviously glorified in what they do, but at the same time, they're pretty standard. They have hobbies. They play Fortnite. They play Animal Crossing. So it's just cool.
Would you say your current job is your dream job, or do you have an absolute dream job? Like what are your plans for the future?
My current job is absolutely not my dream job by any stretch of the imagination. I like it, but in terms of what my dream job would be, I really want to start an agency of my own that works around sports, not necessarily in sports. And hopefully kind of takes all of my talents in terms of creating campaign identities and brand identities and logos. So I think that would be my dream job. I've mentioned it before on other mediums that is my intention. And I definitely would love to dive more into logo design, which I think I enjoy the most out of anything that I do. Although I think it's good to have that mix. So I do those sports designs and I do the cool edit stuff, but I also like to step back and do the really super hyper refined logos and things like that. And I think that having that balance is what allows you to explore as many avenues of creativity as possible.
I was thinking we didn't ask you this. We should have it in the beginning, but you're not walking alone, right? You have a team around you.
In my role day to day.
Yeah.
So like define a team. Like are there other creatives who I work with or are there other people?
What does your daily job consist of? Like, who do you interact with on a daily
Sure.
basis?
So I, being the director of graphic design in college sports, is a bit of an inflated role just because at the moment I don't have anybody under me. And so I think it's a glorified term for a senior graphic designer. So on a day to day basis, I interact with the director of marketing and the director of video, and we are frequently putting our heads together to kind of troubleshoot and problem solve whatever issues come up. But on a day to day basis, I field requests from, they're called sports information directors, and they are basically the account managers for each team that handle logistics of the team and interface directly with
Okay.
me. And so I synergize, I handle, I think, I'm going to try and list them all off: basketball, soccer, men and women's for both, track, cross country, men and women's for both, rowing, men and women's for both, baseball, volleyball for women, just a ton. So I manage like 12 teams, creative needs, and it's a lot.
Okay. So the art direction is mostly up to you.
It's entirely up to me. I would say it's 95% up to me in terms of what direction to take it, which is great because that's what you would hope for. But at the same time, the actual management of it is more, it's just more than like one person can do, you know? And so I do my best on a daily basis to educate people around me who have, so I will make like templates and stuff and hand them off to people so that they can edit them. But I have to do my best to make sure that those people are knowledgeable enough to be able to work in my templates and make them easy enough to where people can just plug and play. Same thing with like Lightroom filters that we use on Instagram. And so it's an incredibly big task for one person, which is unfortunate. I do my best, but there's not enough time in the day for me to be able to catch everything that goes out the door just because there is such a high volume that gets done.
Prior to like all the COVID-19 stuff, did you like work in-house or did you work remote?
Yes, prior to COVID, I was in-house 9 to 5 practically. I give and take in different regards. So I live about 20 minutes away from where I work. And so I would go in every day in-house. And then since obviously COVID has happened, I actually brought my work computer home to be able to work remotely. And luckily I have a pretty beefy internet package, so I can, it's easy to be able to do that. But yeah, it's definitely changed things a little bit.
So, like with all this going on, do you prefer working in-house? Do you like that environment more, or do you prefer like working from
I
home?
think I prefer, there's two mouths to feed, so to speak, when you're working professionally. There's the socialite mouth, which is like the human interaction mouth, and then there's like the pure creativity, unfiltered, undisturbed mouth. And so I think it's important to feed both to a certain extent, but at the same time, I am inherently an introvert, which makes me really appreciate the times like these where I get to work from home, because not only do I get to kind of set my own hours and work on what I want to, which is obviously like the case even when I was in-house as well, but it's more so when you're working from home just because you've got the flexibility to roll out of bed and start your day at 7:30 if you so choose. But I prefer working from home, and it's just nice to have your own home setup, I think, because when you're in the office, you use the office setup. When you're at home, you kind of have your own setup. So I prefer 100% working from home.
Do you feel like the design industry has been affected a lot by the current COVID situation?
I think so. I think anytime that there's like a global shift in mentality like this, it's crazy. You're in France, Riley's in Kentucky, I'm in Washington State. I have friends in Poland, I have friends in Australia. Every single one of those people is like self-quarantining right now, right? So anytime that there's a global situation like that affects people to this extent where they are thrown out of their loop of anytime that you're thrown off routine so much like that, creativity is not, in my mind, something that you just kind of clock in for at 9 a.m., clock out for p.m., right? It strikes at different times. It's brought on as a result of different things that happen in your life. It's encouraged by things that happen. It's also detracted by things that happen. And so I think I have noticed a lot of people taking this time to really come to terms with themselves. I know a lot of creatives are now like they used to get their inspiration from walking the streets of New York every day, and they used to get their inspiration from all of the fun hangouts that they go to, and so I think when you shift it so dramatically the way that it has, it obviously affects everybody, right? And so I think my parents growing up always told me that you can't control the situation at hand, you can only control how you react to it, and I take that to heart because I think that it's extremely difficult mentally to continue to stay creative, but to me that's a motivator when there are less obstacles. There's less opportunity for me to go hang out with friends. There's less, distraction, so to speak. So I am personally taking this opportunity to really grow myself creatively and stretch my bounds just because that's the type of person that I am, right? I know a lot of people out there are really, really struggling right now. They live alone. They don't have a wife or a dog that they can come home to or spend time with or be home with at all, right? And so I feel a lot for people out there who are solo, but at the same time, that's not my situation. So I can only control what I can control. And I am trying to grow, like miracle grow out here during this time because I've got the means and I've got the ability. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it has such a huge impact. It's going to make big shifts into not only our daily lives, also how we view society,
Right.
how we've built civilization so
I
far.
agree. I think now more than ever, I hate to get all depresso on this, but I think now more than ever, cyber attack would be devastating. Just with how much we rely on the internet, right? And I think I talk to my wife about this every day. Like, how is this going to affect how companies view working from home moving forward, right? Knowing that we can do it. There used to be an excuse like, oh, that's just not our policy. We just don't work from home, right? But now nobody can really say that. Everybody has worked from home to a certain extent. And so
Yeah, it's an eye-opening situation.
absolutely, right? And you really learn, everybody now will have the experience of how to receive critique and feedback online versus hovering over your shoulders. And so to me, as I put my tinfoil hat on, I see populations increasing. I see this huge need for not necessarily more offices, but more space to house people. And there's carbon emissions and there's all of this different greenhouse gas type stuff going on. Any chance where we can have people stay home and work from home, I'm all about it. I'm like, let's go. Like, this is an opportunity for you to be in a zone where you're comfortable with having I think the ideal situation would be a option to come into work or work from home, whatever you're wanting for the day. I think that this is developing a level of trust in organizations with their employees and vice versa that will allow people to say, hey, listen, we did it for, let's say, worst case scenario, a year and a half, right? Where we worked from home remotely and nobody dropped the ball, things didn't change, we all learned how to work together in different ways. But I think that for the most part, like, this is way better. Um, Having this ability to say, yes, this worked, and yes, we did this, and there's scientific data that backs what I'm saying. So
kind of like we're nearing the end of the podcast. Just a few more questions left. Kind of a few last ones of like the more serious ones are just like, where do you see yourself in like 5 to 10 to 20 years from now? Like, I remember you saying earlier you want this career to
right.
last. So like, where do you see yourself within this career?
I want to be, my vocation in the creative industry is to inspire others and enable them to realize that they can accomplish whatever they set their mind to, right? And so it's a super kind of preachy objective, but I want to lead by example. And so my hope in the next 5 to 10 years that I can revisit this podcast and say, I did exactly what I said I was going to do. I want to start an agency in the next 2 to 3 years. I want to continue to develop world-class work that I think furthers the design industry and furthers people's awareness of it. I want to give people the tools that they need to feel comfortable pitching projects. I want to give people tools that they feel comfortable pricing their work out, that they feel comfortable, presenting it professionally, getting their ideas across. I want to be a resource for people. My pipe dream as a kid, or I guess not as a kid, but as a kid in the industry and starting off, was always to brand an Olympics, like an Olympic Games. I don't know if that's still the vision to this day, but I definitely want to do work of that caliber and work in ways that enable me to continue to grow and also allow others around me to grow as well. I have been in situations where I feel I just want to put creativity first and see what happens, in a nutshell.
So to wrap up the more serious questions, what do you think would be your key piece of advice for younger designers? Just people wanting to just dip their feet into design and get into it.
My advice for younger designers is the advice that I would have given to myself, and it's that there is no shortcut to success. I think as a young creative, I was always focused on the job title and the responsibility and the quickest, fastest way I could get to the top. And now looking back, even only having been in the industry for 6 years, or being creative, so to speak, and teaching myself, I think that there is value in the process. I think there's value in starting out as a junior designer, working under people who are more experienced than you. You might be the most talented kid in the universe. I don't care. You need the hard skills of working under people because it teaches you to appreciate the work that you no longer have to do. And I think that to go back to my original point, is value in the process of working from a junior designer to a midway to a senior level to a director to a whatever. I think that a lot of people who are younger think that they want to go straight to a manager role or they want to go straight to a director role, but there are different perks at that level and there are different drawbacks. And I think that part of what makes a good any position is that you have the experience to fall back on. And I didn't always think this way. I always was like, if I can do it, but it's not just about creativity. There are other hard skills that you have to develop along the way that will enable you to become the best version of whatever your final result is. And so from that perspective, I think that there is definitely value in going through the entire process.
That's perfect. And
Poor
with
dog.
hearing the background noise, I think I'm gonna start off with a question of I know you have some pets, so what type of dogs do you have? Like what breed? And
At Harvey on Insta, he's the cutest little mixed breed rescue that I have ever seen in my life. My wife and I adopted him and rescued him from Mexico when we lived on Instagram. You can go ahead and throw a little screen on the screen right now if you want to show the Instagram account. He's literally adorable. He looks like a puppy. He's 2 years old. He is a forever puppy, just based on he was the runt of the pack when we adopted him. And we have just given him nothing but love and support through his entire life, because otherwise we don't know what his situation would have been like if he was, still down in Mexico, which I think enables my wife to spoil him a little bit more, a lot bit more, quite frankly, just because to us, he's like our fur baby, literally. I never thought I'd be the guy to say that. He's literally like our child. We spoil him rotten.
I feel like that's how basically any pet turns out. It's just like, oh, it's a pet. No, it's part of the family now,
Yeah, he has a seat at the dinner table.
What's the best food?
What is the best food in the world?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
And why is it
Like
Italian?
the best style, or what is my?
I don't know. What's your best dish? Your favorite dish?
My
Actually, that could be
favorite
a question
dish.
for the.
That's tricky, just because I don't know. There's so
I'll
many
ask
good. I
that
really
again.
love Mexican. Mexican is like the best, like comfort food to me, I think.
I could agree with that.
Like, no, actually, we all know the one answer to the best food in the world.
What?
It's pizza. There's no other competition. It has to be
Yeah.
pizza, right? Like, it literally
There's
is the ultimate food.
Oh, there's this amazing pizza place in Kentucky called Miguel's. It's like you go hiking, and then right whenever you get off the mountain, like it's just there, and it's so good. It's like the best pizza ever.
I think this is my theory. Any food that is like contained within itself across all cultures is delicious. So like burritos, delicious. Pizza, delicious. You know, like you don't cheeseburgers, delicious. Like you don't have to. It's like handheld food, right?
Yeah.
That's my working theory. I don't know.
We're putting this question at the end because I honestly love that.
It's great.
Do you have any like hobbies other than like just like spending all your time designing? You're like, what do you do for fun?
When I am allowed to go outside, I have a personal Instagram account that I'm a big fan of like architectural photography, and so back when I lived in Seattle, it was like free reign. Oh my god, I love this. I just kind of take it with my iPhone. I'm like a hobbyist photographer, I guess you could say, but it's something that gives me great passion. And it's just kind of like whenever I'm out in nature or outside the city and I'm like, holy cow, this is really cool. I just snap a photo, right? And so I think that would be my hobby. Obviously these days I watch a ton of Netflix with my wife. And then I don't necessarily count that as a hobby. I hate people who say that Netflix is their hobby because it's such a cop out, but I also am super big into hot sauce. So if you have any questions regarding hot sauce, I can pretty much answer anything that you want to know.
We'll have to have a follow-up podcast episode where we're just talking about it's just gonna be a hot one off.
yeah, by all means. No, so I have to give a quick shout out. If you're going, and this might not apply to NJ or I guess Riley. My favorite store-bought brand is Valentina's. I think it's the best hot sauce. And then my favorite overall hot sauce ever is a brand based out of Portland, Oregon called Aardvark hot sauce. And I think you can have them shipped internationally. It's literally the most delicious hot sauce I've ever had in my life. It goes well with just about everything, savory, sweet, you name it, just throw it on. It's delicious. And so, yeah. I there was a time 2 or 3 years ago where at the time and I would literally go find the hottest hot sauces we could online. And we set out with a mission to develop our hot sauce palette. So every single day we would take like a spoonful or like a dab on your finger and consume the hottest possible hot sauces we could find so that we would kind of get an acquired taste for the hotter stuff. And it sucks. Like it's really painful. So
got a little distracted. I'm looking at Harvey.
He's cute, huh? He's a cute looking dog, man.
He's cute. I like
my wife does a great job. You what?
He's wearing a rain jacket in one of them. I like that.
Oh, so that particular picture is funny because so we got him from San Diego, like I mentioned, and where we moved, Washington State, it's super cold, rainy, snowy, and so we were always joking around like, what the heck is this dog gonna do when he sees snow for the first time? Because he's like a Mexico dog, like hot adobo clay kind of dog, and we're taking him up here to like Snowville, USA. And so that picture was funny because it was like a visual representation of how pissed he was that we brought him up here. So it's cute.
It's funny.
I love that dog. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that sums it up for this episode of On the Spot. I'd like to thank Dan again for joining us. Do you have any other social medias or anything like that you want to plug before we go?
Oh, geez. I guess just find me on social media, Design with Dan. As of April 4th, 2020, that's my handle. Who knows? It could change in like 2 or 3 years, but
we'll link
Design with Dan. It's the way to go.
Yeah, we'll link all those in the description on the YouTube channel, and we'll see what we do for Spotify and all those other ones. Awesome. For me and NJ, make sure to join the Spot Discord server. A bunch of cool people on there. Get lots of feedback and just chat with designers in general. We also have an Instagram and a Twitter. It's a little bit empty right now, but that's soon to change. We'll also have a website coming soon, so join the Discord also to get updates on that. And I think that's it. Thank you guys for listening to this episode, and we'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.